Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast, where I have the opportunity to discover how people have created income streams and a lifestyle out of their genius. I want to inspire you to think about your genius in a different way because there is a place in the market for it. And today I have the opportunity to reconnect with someone that I knew almost feels like a former life. And then we reconnected through this speakers group that we're both a part of now. It's been really fun to reintegrate what we know and what we do in this new interaction. So David Otey is here today. And David, I would love to have you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Shelby, and thank you for having me on a podcast that you say celebrates genius because I think that's probably the highest compliment anyone's paid me today. I don't know if I'm a genius in anything, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I've done as a speaker, author, speaking coach, trainer, all these different but related things I do under the umbrella of professional speaking and being a thought leader and an expert
Yeah.
in communication. I position myself especially as an expert in communication for people that have a high level of technical skill and can stand to improve the way they communicate. And I include in that scientists, engineers, medical professionals, even financial professionals, the people who tend to be very task focused. I have a degree in physics and 25 years in broadcast engineering before I pivoted to this second career now where I'm an entrepreneur and have been for about 14 years. And it's great to reconnect with you. We first
Yeah,
connected through a Toastmasters club in Billings, and then I
we
left Billings and
did.
I'm in the Denver area now.
Yes, and that was a really fun for me to get because Toastmasters was something that was new to me, and you had had significantly more experience in it. And I want to get into that a little bit about how, because I
Mhm.
imagine that had some contribution to your, my definition of a genius is something that you've done for a while and that you have an expertise in that you can help others with. And I feel that back when we met in Toastmasters here in Billings, which was 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
it's that is now you're even in a different place. And so it's kind of fun to hear about that foundational skill. But yeah, tell us a little bit. I mean, I'm very curious about your niche and where you focus. I know you speak and work with more people outside of that space,
Right.
but yeah, can you tell me just a little bit more about your background and maybe get into Toastmasters a little bit, how you got into that?
That all ties in together. It really
Hmm.
does.
I kind of see.
Um, I starting in the 80s, I was working in broadcast engineering. I had, and that was interesting the way it came about. It was sort of unintentional. My undergraduate major was a double. My undergraduate degree was a double major in radio, TV, film, and physics. Because why not?
Because
Um,
why not?
because
That's
I've always been
not a
interested
very
in.
common double major, I don't think. So,
It's not, but I have always been curious about how the world works and about how we tell the stories of how we understand the world to work. That intersection of the hard sciences and the humanities. That's always been where my interests have been most focused. So it seemed natural for me to pursue that. And I ended up working in TV production and realizing I had learned the craft of television, but not the business of it. So
mhm.
I went back to school to get a master's degree in broadcasting management, and the job I came up with in Austin, Texas, to work my way through graduate school was an engineering position at a TV station. Worked actually for two different TV stations in Austin. And by the time I left Austin, I was chief engineer of the public TV station there. So if you're familiar with the PBS program Austin City Limits, I worked on that show for 11 years.
Oh, I love that. I love
Still going. It's been going for 50 years now, and I
my
haven't worked
brother. My
on.
brother's a bluegrass musician, so we listen
Oh,
to a lot of Austin City Limits.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing led to another. I was in Denver and I was working for a company that specialized in the behind the scenes technologies that make live TV news and sports coverage possible. And I got involved in the rollout of a new digital technology that was going to affect the way TV news was done. And I was recruited to go to work for the company that was going to do the training around that technology. So here I am. I come from an engineering but also communication background
Mhm.
with a dual master's degree. That's an MA in communication and an MBA in management. And the company approached me and said, "We know that you have deep expertise in this technology, and we've also seen your communication skills. We want you to head up this training program." So, 3 years and 10,000 trainees later, we finished that program, and I decided that was kind of fun. I was ready to be done with television,
Yeah.
and was ready to go a different direction. And this idea of training, speaking to people and seeing the light bulbs come on, and taking a group of people who had been very fearful about what this new technology was going to mean for their job skills and helping them embrace it as something that was going to help them do a better job easier and make it more enjoyable for them. That was just so eye opening for me that I ended up making a pivot. And I created my own LLC in 2011 and picked up some uh, public speaking clients and training clients. And I've done, if you look at the days on my calendar, I've done more days of training, really.
Mhm.
And I've lately been pivoting more toward the speaking side. I also coach. I coach speakers. I've coached um, all kinds of speakers, but I market myself primarily as a coach to people who have deep technical expertise and have reached the point where they realize they need something beyond that to carry them forward in their career. They need the communication skills.
Mhm.
And so I've been coached by some of the best speakers I can think of in the whole country. I'm a certified world class speaking coach. That's a program by a fellow named Craig Valentine. I've learned a lot from him. I co coach with him a course that he teaches online uh, on keynote speaking. And you mentioned Toastmasters. It was when I was involved in that training project that the fellow who hired me and was assembling with me this team of people that was they were going to be the actual trainers on this content, and I was going to be creating the training program or co-creating it, and then training the trainers. And the guy that hired me was a big advocate for Toastmasters. He said, and we were scattered all over the country. We were sort of working remotely before anybody knew what working remotely was. And he said, in your own home cities, that I want you to find a Toastmasters club because that is how you can really continue to develop your presentation skills. And so I first joined a Toastmasters club in Littleton, Colorado in 2005 in the fall. So it'll be 20 years this year that I've continuously been in at least one Toastmasters club during that time. When I was in Billings, I think I was a member of three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and have recently been a member of two. Currently, I'm only a member of one. Um, but I had a lot of my friends and colleagues in Toastmasters telling me, David, have you considered, if you're looking at a career change, have you considered speaking professionally? And so I thought of myself as, reframing myself as a professional speaker. What I didn't hear until later, and really this was something I started getting drummed into me when I moved back to the Denver area in 2018. So I've been back here nearly 7 years. Um, I joined the Colorado chapter of the National Speakers Association, and I have to put a plug in for them as well. And that's when I started hearing, instead of you need to be a professional speaker, I started hearing you need to build a speaking business. And that's kind of when my light bulb came on because those are really two different things. Speaking professionally is one thing. Building a sustainable business out of what you do as an entrepreneur um, required a bit of a mind shift for me. And that's
Yeah.
really what has made me more successful at what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. Two different things.
Right.
Two different things, but they're mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. They're kind of tied together. So
Right.
it's
Right.
yeah, you can have more of a presence if you have the business structure behind it, the brand, the
Mm-hmm.
whole business piece. I want to get
Mm-hmm.
back. I have a question about, so you were inspired by a mentor to get into a Toastmasters, and then that started to open your eyes. Do you find in the particularly in a niche, I know you work outside of your niche, but
Mm-hmm.
particularly with the people that are the engineers and I'm an academic, so sim I feel like it's a similar genre of people that we
Hmm.
have worked with. Do you find that it's a time, do you find there's more success when they come to you or when you open the option to them? Like, are they even thinking about their communication? I think of this with kids too. It's like the way that
Hmm.
you communicate, the way that you present yourself is fine for an audience, but if you want to speak to somebody different or gain more skills, like, can you talk a little bit about that and how what that challenge is? Because we think it's something that's really important, and leaders do think that, but it's hard to break through that
Yeah, to
feeling, I
get
think.
the technical professionals who are individual contributors to realize that. I have found I've worked with people that I've connected with in a variety of different ways.
Uh-huh.
What I have found is that the people who have been most successful, in my view, and most coachable are generally the people who have figured out on their own, I need a coach.
Yeah.
Okay. When I say to people, I help nerdy people like me. Notice, the shirt I'm wearing that looks like graph paper, right? I wear this as a tribute to my engineering background and the engineers I work with. Um, I find that when I say to people, yes, I help nerds like me learn to talk gooder, um, so many people say, oh, that's so needed.
Yeah,
The
for sure.
challenge is finding the people who realize that's something I need and I can see the value of investing in it.
For sure.
There's so many people who need to improve their communication skills, but don't yet see that it's something they need to invest in.
Right.
Invest the time and invest the money. Because clearly I'm in this because it's for me a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my coaching packages, my services that I provide. Um, I also speak. I'm a breakout speaker and a keynote speaker. I've spoken to companies that hire a lot of engineers and
Mm-hmm.
spoken to them about communication skills and particularly about storytelling. And this is an area where I think I've sort of got my second professional round of deep expertise. My at one time my deep expertise was in coded orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, and you don't even have to repeat that. I promise you.
I don't think I
Digital
could.
digital radio technology, and that got
Yeah.
me to a certain point. Now I feel like my deep expertise is in storytelling
Yeah.
and the importance of using storytelling even in a technical presentation. Facts tell, stories sell. If you want your information to take root in the minds of your audience, you have to meet the audience's needs. It can't be about your need for presenting information. It's got to be, what does my audience need from me? So that's why when I'm coaching people, we always start with some basic questions about who is your audience, why are they there, how is your message going to improve something for them, and most important, how do you want your listeners, or what do you want your listeners to think, do, or feel differently when you're done?
Mm-hmm.
And once we know that, then we focus on how are you going to use a story to accomplish those things. Because no matter how technical the presentation, there's always a story. I work with people who are experts at finding the story in their data. They just need some help telling that story and not just telling the data.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see I mean, that's a need. That's a need for leaders in the companies. That's a need as you talk to your clients. I mean, it's really a sales piece too,
Hmm.
and persuasion and influence. So
It
yeah,
is. When you're in speaking, you're in sales.
100% because you're
You know,
selling yourself.
you're selling yourself and you're selling your ideas.
Hmm.
Even if I'm not saying to somebody, please invest in hiring me to speak or to coach you or to train you, I'm still selling my ideas from the
Right.
platform. Um, so there's got to be that sales aspect to it, and a big part of sales is shutting up and asking the right questions. What does my audience need from me? What do you need? If I'm trying to sell you something and I don't understand what your needs are, that's not going to be a very successful conversation.
So I'm really big on brand story, and I think that a lot of speakers have a hard time identifying what that brand story is,
Hmm.
and what that, who you speak to. You talked about how you're wearing the shirt that identifies with that. You kind of live the brand. Did it
Hmm.
take you a while to come to that realization that,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
these are the people I should be speaking to? And one of the lessons I learned from one of the first coaches I had, business coaches I had, was that you should coach and consult your former self. So
Yeah, that did
I
take
thought
me a while to
that's
figure
so
out.
simplistic, but it's true.
Yeah, it did take me a little while to figure that out. And one of the things that was key to that was when about 9 years ago, I subscribed as a speaker. I subscribed to a service. There was a website based service for people to find speakers. So the speakers who wanted to be found paid a
Hmm.
subscription fee. That was the model of it. I don't do that anymore, but I got exactly one job out of that, and it changed everything for me because there was someone who posted a need for a career development speaker who would speak on scientific presentations to a gathering of pharmaceutical scientists. This was a national association. Actually, it even has international members. So it's an association with thousands of members, most of whom attend their annual meeting.
Hmm.
And I applied for that and got it. And that's when I thought this really could be my niche. Talking with scientists and engineers, because I have that technical background. I have a degree in physics. Yes, it's just a bachelor's degree. I don't hold myself out as a physicist or a scientist, a practice. I've never been a practicing scientist, but I did have it when I was working in broadcast engineering. I had respected credentials in that field, so I can connect with those people. And it was when I landed that first opportunity with that or association, who I still speak to annually,
Hmm.
that I realized that's where I need to go to find my people. So I've spoken to that association. I've spoken to companies that hire scientists and engineers. I've spoken here in Golden, Colorado, where I'm based, to NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab that's right here in Golden. I've spoken at School of Mines, Colorado School of Mines, which is right up the hill from where I live. Um, these are not clearly the only people I speak to or work with,
Yeah,
but they're my core. They're
they're
my
your core.
target market. You've got to know your target market. If you market to everyone, you market to no one.
Yes. Everything to do with your brand and everything.
Mm-hmm.
If
And
you
my brand,
don't take
and this branding that you see here, David Otey, engineer, you're speaking. This is a relatively new branding scheme for me,
yeah.
and I will shortly have some videos up on YouTube explaining what I mean by engineer you're speaking. Um, you don't have to be an engineer to admire and respect good engineering.
Right.
Um, an example I use is uh, it always gave me great pleasure to drive across or to see from a distance a particular bridge in Austin that crosses Lake Austin. It's called the Loop 360 Bridge over Lake Austin. It's got these enormous steel arches that span the whole stretch of the dammed up Colorado River there that's called Lake Austin, and the roadway is suspended from that. It's an elegant solution, and aesthetically, it mirrors the hills surrounding it, because that's the beginning of the Texas Hill Country. Now, I'm not a structural engineer, but I can admire what went into designing that. As a user of that bridge, I can admire that.
Sure.
The thing is, if you're engineering a solution to anything, whether it's a structure, a piece of software, anything else, you've got to start with understanding what are the end user's requirements. So that's where I start with this concept of engineer you're speaking. Start with the audience. They're the end user of your product.
Hmm.
Start with the audience, understand their needs, figure out the tried and true technologies, or in my case, storytelling techniques that are going to help you meet those needs, and then put them together in such a way that people will at the end of it say, wow, that was built for me. That speaker was speaking directly to me. These are all, I can teach people the techniques for making your audience feel like you're speaking to me, you're speaking my
Mhm.
language. And storytelling is such a big part of that because you can't just deliver information. You've got to put it in context. And stories are the fundamental unit of creating human context. I could go on and on about this at greater length than what we have time for here, but
Yeah.
you know, for example, I tell this story, and I'll keep it short. Um, Not long after I was promoted to chief engineer at KLRU TV in Austin, I wrote a paper on what our brilliant audio engineers were doing at the time that was very cutting edge with automating part of the post production process for Austin City Limits. I submitted that paper to the Society of Broadcast Engineers, which was holding their annual conference that year in Houston. They said, David, we want you to come to Houston and present that paper at the conference. And I was so excited. I thought, wow, this is an opportunity for me to sort of be seen on a bigger stage and to tout what we're doing back at the TV station. I drove to Houston. I was so excited to do this. I walked into a big, mostly empty ballroom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, aka nap time, and I proceeded to put my audience to sleep. I was so sure I had done well in speech classes in high school, but nothing I had
Yeah.
done professionally to that point had prepared me for what that challenge really was. And I drove back thinking, what a wasted trip this was. Years later, I was approached by this company that said, David, we've seen what you've done in these industry wide meetings that you've moderated to help try to break the roadblock on rolling out this new technology. We want you to be in charge of this training project because you have the communication skills as well as the engineering background. And I was pumped. Here was somebody recognizing the skills that I brought to that particular situation. Now, then I would ask my audience if I'm telling this story, what do you think made that difference between me driving home in shame from Houston and me being approached about this opportunity to lead this nationwide training project on this new technology? This is a technique that I've learned from Craig Valentine called Then, Now, and How. How do you think I bridged that gap? And then the answer is through study and practice and coaching and learning more about the art of storytelling. So that even when I was moderating those summit meetings, there was a story woven through them.
Mhm.
And that's an example of, well, that's really my brand story. That's
Right.
what led to one thing after another and to me doing what I'm doing now as an individual, as a solopreneur. Um, and why for me storytelling is at the heart of it, and I approach that with people that come at it from a technical background by saying, look, here's the solution. It's a systematic process. I go for people who are very process oriented, and that systematic process I call engineer your speaking. So that's my story brand. My
That's your
brand
story.
story, rather.
Yeah.
My brand story.
How now you're an author as well. Do you
Yes.
talk about this in your books? Can you tell me about your writing?
Um, one of the things that was drummed into me as I started down this road of professional speaking is speakers need books.
Yes.
Because meeting planners love to be able to say to their prospective attendees, look who our speaker is. He's the person who wrote the book on X. It just gives you immediate credibility. So when I decided to write my first book, I thought, what do people mostly come and ask me about? And the answer was, they asked me about stories.
Yep.
So I came up with this concept of the Speaker's Quick Guide. It's a thin book. You can get through it pretty quickly. It's not a lot of fluff. It's all very actionable, very practical. So my first book in the series was called The Speaker's Quick Guide to Telling Better Stories. And then as I got more into talking to technical professionals about technical presentations, my second book in the series was The Speaker's Quick Guide to Technical Presentations. Now, is there some overlap between them? Yes, there is. Things like that question I mentioned earlier, what do I want my listeners to think, do, or feel differently when I'm done? That's what I call the specific purpose. That shows up in both of these books. And then more recently, I've realized that a lot of people came to me saying, David, I've got this story that I want to tell. I think it can make a difference to people, but who am I to tell this story? And my answer to that question is, who are you not to? You know, if you've got a story that the, the experience of which can benefit other people, you need to tell it. But people have come to me and not had the confidence to do that. So the third book in the series is The Speaker's Quick Guide to Presenting with Confidence. And it's got practical tips in it about how to overcome nerves for people who are frightened or nervous about getting in front of an audience to speak. And but it goes deeper than that because it's also about, what is the value of finding your own story and sharing that, and how do you find the universal in the particulars? The particulars of your story are unique to you, the events, the times, the dates, the places. So what do you find that's universal? And the universal is almost always the emotional content of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you tell a story about something you survived and it inspires people to survive what they're going through, the commonality is not the events. The commonality is that confidence that, hey, if she did this, I can do this.
The transformation.
It's the transformation. And that's always rooted in the emotional aspect of telling a story.
That's great. David, there's so much synergy between what you and I do. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
I'm glad we've reconnected.
we're both in the speaker space and the how you make a bigger impact space. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do.
And
Well,
that's
can you
exactly.
tell our audience what is next for you? You have a few things on the horizon, introducing some new things.
Some new things. Right. Well, so as I've said, I've been speaking for a while on speaking to
Yeah.
especially to technical professionals. And I've been feeling a pull to go in a new direction and to use effectively what these years of speaking experience have prepared me to do. And that is to talk about something that is deeply personal to me, which is mental health and suicide prevention. I have experience with uh, deep depression. I was diagnosed about over 20 years ago with um, depressive disorder, and I have overcome the deep depression that I've been in. But I also realize it's not something I'm cured from, just any more than you would expect to be cured from diabetes. It's something that has to be monitored. And then we had an experience some 10 years after my own experience with depression. My wife and I had the experience of nearly losing our daughter, Barbara, and I have her permission to use her name and her story um, because she attempted to end her life when she was a senior in college. And so I have formed a second brand called Six Words, the Six Words Institute. And it's about giving people permission to talk about mental health, to talk about even things like suicide, suicide loss, suicide survivorship. I've worked with some mental health experts because I'm not a mental health expert. In fact, one of the things I tell people is, when I speak on mental health and suicide prevention, it's from the standpoint of lived experience. That's the term that mental health professionals use for it. And I say, you may not know this, but that phrase lived experience comes from a Latin phrase meaning he did not go to med school.
Mm-hmm.
But med school or not, what's important to understand is that mental health is health.
Right.
It's just as much a part of taking care of yourself as bathing and brushing your teeth and taking your vitamins and getting good
Mm-hmm.
nutrition. You know, mental health is taking care of yourself. And in the workplace, it means that leaders need to understand that if they're not providing the right atmosphere, depending on the choices they make about corporate culture and work design, they can either be contributing to or detracting from their employees' mental health. And that's important for people to realize. So I've done speaking on that as well and plan to do more on it.
Yeah.
If you go to, you can see on the screen here my website, davidotey.com. And there's also a link at the top of it that says David Otey now speaks on suicide prevention. And that'll take you to another site, which is davidotey6words.com. And the reason for the 6 words goes back to an answer to a question that I posed to my daughter when she was recovering from her suicide attempt. And I'm not going to tell you what that answer is right now. But it consisted of 6 words that are just forever engraved on my heart. They made such a difference to me. And that's why my effort in suicide prevention and mental health awareness is called the Six Words Institute.
Such a vulnerable, as you talk about emotion, and as you talk about that's such a key for connecting with your audience, and that sounds like the most vulnerable place you can go to be able to connect with your
Yeah.
audience. So
Yeah. I feel
understand why that's the next thing, but it's a very exciting brand to have because the message is so critical and so important. So
hmm I
yeah.
think it is. I think it is. So I'm looking forward to doing more work in that area as well. And some of my professional speaker friends repeat the often told maxim when it comes to speaking: stick to your lane.
Yeah.
I'm intentionally moving in 2 lanes right now,
And
and
that's okay.
we'll see how that goes.
See how it is possible. That is for sure. Well, David, where can our audience, outside of your website, which is right there, the
hmm
davidotey.com, where can our audience connect with you and find your information?
Well, the best place to go would be to go to davidotey.com. On that website, in a number of locations, you'll see a little button that says schedule a consultation. And someone can click on that button and it takes them straight to my calendar. They can grab 15 minutes for a no cost, no obligation discovery call, talk about whatever's on their mind, whether it has to do with presentation skills, whether it has to do with mental health and resources that I can point people to, either one. Um, and that's available. It's all over the website at davidotey.com. Or people can just reach out to me directly using david at davidotey.com and send me an email. And if they do, it would be useful if they would reference this program so that I know the context for reaching out and making connection with me. I always love to connect with people and reconnect.
And reconnect. This has just been such a treat to learn more about what you do and learn about your books, learn about the impact that you're making with the community that you're in. I look forward to more speaking interactions with you. So
Yes, I look forward to that as well.
yes, I
Hope to
need
see
to.
you in person before long.
I know. Well, I'm in Colorado pretty frequently, so I need to get down there more often.
Good, good. Would love to see you.
Yes. Well, David, it's been a treat to have you on the podcast today. I think you are a shining example of someone who has transformed their expertise and their lived experience into a business that impacts others. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast. So thank you for telling your story.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. And to all you potential genius entrepreneurs out there, there's no reason you can't do the same thing. I wrote a book about it too, how you can transform your genius into an income stream and share that with the world and make a bigger impact. It's time for you to start thinking about your expertise a little bit differently. So thanks again, David, and we will see you all next time when we explore more stories about how you can make a bigger impact with your story. See you next time.